I think one of the things that I recommend for folks that are a little bit scared about putting out their own content is read other folks' content and then comment on it with a take. See how people engage, see if people agree or disagree. That is a great way for you to get some positive feedback and reinforcement and or see, okay, that take doesn't align with as many folks as I thought.
Welcome to Mission of Missions. I'm your host, Jeremy Tiers. This is the show designed to help you grow, both professionally and personally, in the fast-paced world of higher education. Every other Tuesday, I sit down with senior leaders, new professionals, and difference makers from across higher ed and beyond, where we'll share tips and strategies related to challenging topics like student recruitment, leadership, customer service, enrollment marketing, and time management. So if you're looking for practical advice and conversations that actually move the needle, this show's for you. Grab your notepad or fire up your notes app, and let's get into it. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Tiers, and this is episode 75 of the Mission Admissions podcast. Think about your favorite brands. What is it for you, right, that makes them memorable? What value do they provide? Branding is something that obviously is super important for any business or even a college or university. And recently, I've started to get a lot more questions from people around the topic of personal brand building, which is something I am very much committed to. Joining me today on the pod is my good friend Joel Renner, who is an expert on this topic and has been in the space for over a decade. And he's somebody who has helped me grow my personal brand. And so I'm excited to chop it up and just help a number of people listening today figure out why they need to build their personal brand and like how to do it successfully. So thanks for joining me on the pod today, Joel.
Hey, great to be here, and always love a conversation with you.
As do I. I think the easiest place to start, Joel, is just like, if we're going to define personal branding for you, what are we defining it as?
Yeah, so I think for me, it is what your professional personality is. It's how you show up every day in your workspace. I think a lot of people get the idea that your personal brand is kind of this exaggerated person or thing. And so it becomes hard for folks to think about it. But really, it's just your professional personality.
Why else do you think building your personal brand is so important, especially for those working in the higher ed industry?
Well, I think it's in higher education, credibility and trust are huge, and so your professional personality is what shows up all the time, and whether that is posting on LinkedIn all the time and sharing your journey, sharing the work you're doing, your successes and your failures, or if it's just simply creating a community that might be in the background, right? People that know you and know what you've been up to, and that you can go to sometimes share those wins. So it doesn't always need to be something that's overt, but hugely important because of that sort of trust. And you also think of higher ed having it's about long-term relationship building, and so you need that consistency to show up in the space. It's less about promotion and more about, here are the things that I do all the time.
Why do you think then, Joel, so many people aren't intentionally spending time on actually building their personal brand?
They're scared. Like, honestly, it's, how do I put out the right thing, or what would I say, or I have no value, right? That imposter syndrome that creeps up on folks. And it's something as well that I found throughout my career, and especially when I was the co-chair of EDU Web Digital Summit, is just encouraging people to share what their success looked like and put in for a presentation and get a little bit of confidence.
It's interesting you mentioned imposter syndrome, because I'd written that down, and it's something that has come up, in a handful of episodes on the pod with previous guests. And I actually think, I'd love to get your take on this, that I'll say one of the internal benefits of working and growing your personal brand is, I think it like decreases this idea of imposter syndrome. What are your thoughts on that idea or statement?
I think one of the things that I recommend for folks that are a little bit scared about putting out their own content is read other folks' content and then comment on it with a take. See how people engage, see if people agree or disagree. That is a great way for you to get some positive feedback and reinforcement, and or see, okay, that take doesn't align with as many folks as I thought. But imposter syndrome is, I'm not doing the same things that others are doing. And sometimes other folks are just simply highlighting small wins and making them look a little bit bigger. Sometimes they are simply sharing their journey, and they're at a point now where their journey just looks different.
And I think that's, the key here, at least in my mind, which is if you think of personal brand building as simply sharing your personality, like you said earlier, and sharing your journey, I would argue, there's nothing that you need to be worried or nervous about. Is it going to resonate with every person? No,
No.
because I would argue nobody's journey resonates with every single person, right? But
Yeah.
what have you seen then over your career as you work with people? Because I know this is something you do a lot
hmm
with your crafted brand. What are you finding people are, once they've worked with you, saying, wow, okay, when I start to now commit to working on my personal brand, like here are some of the, I'll say, immediate benefits or ROI that I see?
Learning is a huge benefit to building your personal brand, and that comes through feedback from others, right? A lot of the work that I have people do is internally say, here's who I think I am, and then externally asking folks, who am I to you, right? One of the questions that I often tell people to ask for any networking session is, if you are reconnecting with somebody, ask them in advance, what's one personality trait or skill or thing you remember about me when we've worked together? And give somebody a chance to be prepared for a networking session. Give somebody a chance to be prepared for their time with you, so that they can be thoughtful. I think so often in the moment, if I were to ask you, Jeremy, like a bunch of questions right now, you would have some answers, but others you would be like, man, I want to take that away. I want to be able to answer that really well for you. But you won't always. Like, not everyone spends that time on their network. So how can you prepare somebody in advance and then take that feedback and learn from it? And I think too often we're not using our networking opportunities and our conversations with others as data points to understand who we should be or who we are.
I want to come back to this idea of imposter syndrome because as I listen to you say all of that, I absolutely think there are also some people who are going to, say, well, all right, if I work on promoting myself and building my personal brand, like I'm going to appear, full of myself or arrogant. I mean, is there a correlation there between all of that and imposter syndrome? Like what if that comes up in a meeting or even just a conversation you're having with somebody, Joel, how do you typically respond to saying, no, 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 here's how I want you to think about it?
The way around it for me has always been, um, you're you're grounded in authenticity and generosity. And so anytime somebody talks about their personal brand, it can't always be just value, right? I think that value, if you're just constantly saying, oh my gosh, check out how amazing this is, check out how amazing this is, check out, like, this is added value to everyone, like, and you have this conversation all the time. But if you are looking and your goal is to bring generosity, sharing credit, highlighting others' work that's similar to the work you're doing, um, that's less about personal attention and more about making sure that your community can see the value of others' work.
How much then do you feel like, because as I listen to you say that, I immediately go to, well, part of what allows your personal brand to grow is understanding, I'll say, who your target audience is and
hmm
like what is so like expand on just how important that is in this whole concept of personal brand building.
This is marketing 101. You have to understand who you're talking to. You want to use the same language that they do. Your brand is not going to be for everyone in every industry. And so, as you're thinking about building it out, it's sometimes role specific. So, I've worked with folks that are industry agnostic, but very much role specific. You want to use the language that leans into that particular industry. But so often with building out your personal brand, who do you want to talk to? Find folks that are talking to that audience, look at what they're doing, and then think about how and what your professional personality would look like if you were engaging. I think the other thing is storytelling is a scary thing for folks, and some aren't very good at that. And so a lot of the work that I've done over my career in the sort of career development space and the personal branding space has been how to help people tell a story that they see themselves in.
Where do you see then, on that note, most people struggling when it comes to telling that story? Like where do you find, yeah, okay, this is usually what I have to help people with most when it comes to telling their story?
Finding their own voice. You and I have a mutual friend, Seth Odell, and he posts constantly. You don't have to keep up with Seth to have a personal brand. You don't even have to keep up with Seth to be an impactful brand. And I think sometimes we see folks that are very visible in any particular industry, and it they go, how do I can't do that. I can't do that. I was talking with a senior enrollment uh, leader a month ago now, and that came up, right? Like multiple people, and they were like, how do I keep up with that? And I said, well, what would it look like for you to create content? Like, how often would you want to? How often feels authentic to you? How often do you have something you want to share? She's like, oh, well, I mean, it's like weekly. I'd probably have something to share.
I think so much of it, to your point, with personal brand building is figuring out, like, what are you trying to get out of this? Right? Like,
Yeah,
what are you hoping? Okay, if I do this right, like this is going to be the result of like what I do. And then using that almost right as your North Star and starting point.
yeah. I also say to so many folks, think evolution, not reinvention. And that's why it always comes from your professional personality. And it also means that when you're new into any particular role and or you're new to your career, that you have to figure some of that out. You cannot just simply say, here's who I am. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't set goals and try and hit those, but evolution, not reinvention. Everyone thinks, and then I think that's the scary part. People think, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to just start posting every week, big things. I'm going to share all the wins and all the fails. And then I can't do it. I just can't do it. So I think that that's there. I also think, as you want to plan for your personal brand, what do you want to be known for, right? So thinking about your story, who is your audience? Who do you need to reach? Then the one thing that people that do this really well, sometimes or do it very naturally, is track what resonates with your audience. Track what resonates. And funny example this week, actually last week, Jenny Petty had a post about, hey, I'm moving from the university side elsewhere. Give me tips on how to sort of manage this work from home thing because I haven't done it. One of her folks in the network had shared a really comment that really just resonated with a bunch of folks, and people were saying something to the effect of, I came here to say this, or she said it really great, or commenting on her comment. And so coming out of that, I actually commented on that comment as well to add, like, hey, here's my little tidbit. She then posted this week and said, hey, so I probably should have just been commenting on other folks instead of posting on my own because here's this comment that has more impressions and more engagement and more than everyone else. And I think that that is just, it's one of those things where it's like, what's the perspective and what should you think about? It does not always need to be your content, but if you were engaged in that community space, it's there. So then now she tagged me because she liked my comment on her new post about this, which is getting huge reach as well. Right. So it's like that's tracking what resonates, right? That's learning from that lesson and then immediately applying it to see what happens.
Well, and how important on that note do you feel like engaging with your community wherever you are, right? Posting, commenting, or doing things is when it comes to obviously growing your personal brand and your reach.
I mean, I think it's paramount. I think it's the key, but I'm somebody that's always thought community first. And so there are times where I am simply part of my personal brand is to amplify others. And so it's often, people will come to me and say, "Hey, here's where I'm at with this," or "Here's what I'm trying to get across." And I am there to not only help them think and strategize, but also just to simply amplify. I don't need to be an expert in all these spaces. I don't also need to have a thought about everything. Sometimes it's just simply saying, "Hey, this is worthy content, and let me share it with my community." But the real key there is that you have an understanding of what your community looks like and engaging with them.
It's so important, and understanding, like you said, what you want to be known for. You've talked about that. Who you're obviously, I'll say, trying to connect with, and what I'll say they find valuable, need help with, things along that nature. And so let's get into then some really tactical things here, Joel. Where do people, if they don't feel like they have, I'll say, a true personal brand, like what are step one, step two, those first couple of
Mhm.
steps that you would say, okay, then my advice is you do this and this first?
Yeah. So this is the fun stuff. So first step is, who do you think you are? I usually say write down 6 or 7 words and take stock of what those words are. Ask a close knit circle for 6 or 7 words as well, and see where the overlap and where there are gaps. And so this is that auditing of your own story. You have to have that understanding of who you are and who you're perceived to be. And I've done this throughout my career as well, and reached out at various times to say, "Hey, does this seem like me, or is this a good fit? Is this something that you think that I'm there?" And there's always risk involved in that, and that's why I think sometimes just asking for words from folks that are associated with yourself. This does not only have to be professional. In fact, I recommend that you get a parent in there, which sounds crazy. You have a sibling or a family member. Um, they're going to all give you perspective on who you are perceived to be.
Yeah, that's so important, I think, to get those different perspectives, because you're right. It's really easy to go to the 4 or 6 people where you're like, these are these are my close friends. These are people. And I am always like, you also need to go to people who, again, you're very friendly with, but like somebody that you might not be friendly with outside of work, right? So you
Yeah.
have a different kind of relationship. And then how much do you think, as you're figuring out who you are, Joel, is really encouraging the people you go to, right, to be just completely blunt with you? Like, do you literally need to tell
Yeah.
them, hey, like, I just want to know, like, good, bad, indifferent? Like, how important is all of that? Because I feel like, and give me your thoughts on this.
Yeah.
Naturally, you're like, Joel, hey, I want to get your thoughts. Most of us are going to be nice people to the other human, especially if we're good friends with them. So we're not going to be like, well, Jeremy, let me first start with what you suck with, like blah 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 blah, And so, how much of it do you think is, as you're getting that feedback from whoever it is and that
Mhm.
perspective, you really need to encourage them, I'll say, to give you both. I don't know if it's the good and the bad, but give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. So this is it's great that you're dialed into this. So this is a bit of an exercise. What I usually tell people is start with the positive, because you want that first interaction with that person to be positive. So if I was speaking to you, I would say something to the effect of, "Hey, could you give me like 4 or 5 words that you just sort of think about when you think about me, or is there a skill or personality trait that you always think of when you think of me?" And if you could share that, and then when you do share that, you say something to the effect of, "Is there anything that I've ever done, or if there things that you thought, you know what, they could get better at that, or they could improve?" So you want to start with that positive, let the person be nice and get a lot of that nice out. And if you ask for a bunch of nice and you only ask for 1 or 2 negative, you're still going to get some of that. Now, the flip side of that is you really should have and work at the relationship to get that trust with them so that they know, hey, if there's a red flag, there's a red flag, right? That's the relationship building side of things. That's that consistency. How do you show up for your network? How do you show up for folks so that you can say, "Hey, what happened here? Like, was there a red flag? Is there something that I did that didn't work out?" and be upfront about that. But I always say start with that positive, and then you can ask about sort of like a red flag or things that rub somebody the wrong way, or it depends on how close you've worked. But there's ways to ask that question.
So then step one, right? Figuring out who you are. Where do we go after we've done that?
Yeah. So step two is now let's coalesce who all this data that we have into something that you feel comfortable with, right? Taking those keywords, thinking about, okay, you're a facilitator and a connector. Um, you are you're someone that's easy to talk to, right? Or somebody that's hard to talk to, right? And if you know these things, that's how you sort of select who your audience is. Next step is to start to tell that story of just yourself. And in this case, it's just write a little bit about yourself. I tend to think about this as your elevator pitch. Okay. It doesn't need to be an elevator pitch. I think people get a little bit scared with that idea, but just simply writing, using those words, writing out what those words mean to you, what things are connected to those words in your career. And you'll find that there's usually a story to be had there. But we're not letting perfect get in the way of good. This is just simply a writing exercise. Um, some folks need a partner to go through that with, right? So sometimes it's a mentor, sometimes it's a coworker, sometimes it's somebody like myself. But that next step is to pull out your story based on the words that you are hearing from yourself and others. And you can pick and choose, right? I mean, there's things that you want to be known for that you might not be as known for now. So part of that step is now you have a story, right? You've worked at this. You're connecting these keywords that people think of and perceive you as to the things that you've done. As a next step, you look at your audience, who might be your audience, right? And how do the stories that you've now shared connect with them? Where are their strengths and weaknesses in the work that you've done, right? So everyone says, "Oh yeah, I think of you with AI," and you're like, "Oh, I don't know that I'm the AI guy. I don't know that I'm the AI person." Maybe it's, "Hey, I need to read a little bit more," or "I need to share my journey from the start," right? "Hey, I don't use AI every day, or I use AI in this small way here, but I've had some folks ask like about this or about that." So it's one of those things where you have to understand the strengths and the weaknesses within your own story, where you have a ton of stories that support one of those words and where you don't. And then you put together a plan for building that up.
Within that plan, where do you feel like it's most beneficial right now for people to ultimately tell their story? Is it a specific social platform? Is it go speak at conferences like we talked about earlier, whether
Mhm.
it's you doing your own presentation, doing it with somebody else? Is it hey, I'm going to try to be on more podcasts next year, start a newsletter? Yes, Jeremy, it's all of the above. Like for most people, where's a good spot to start when it comes to, okay, I figured out who I am. I figured out the kind of audiences that either I want to resonate with or that make the most sense for me to resonate with. And I've started to put together a plan to tell my story. Now, where do I tell it?
Yeah. So this goes back to the sort of community piece of things, and can also sort of play into just marketing. You want to own your backyard. So your backyard can be, "Hey, I work at this institution and I want to be known at this institution for this." Reach out to folks, make sure that if it's a training that you can do some internal trainings. This is a great way and a safe way for you to kind of test those skills. So owning your backyard, right? Sometimes your backyard is the association that you're a part of, or a conference that you've gone to for a long time and you just never have stepped into that. And then it's, "Hey, can I be a part of the leadership? Are there virtual events that I can be a part of? How can I become more visible in this space?" And that visibility doesn't always have to be creating a ton of content. That visibility can sometimes be leadership and guidance of that content. And so this is where I speak to folks, and it's the gamut. right? It's folks like you and I and others that are sharing things a little bit more often, but then there's also others that don't share that often and don't always feel like, hey, is this for me? Um, and so when you are thinking about it from a grassroots perspective, your personal brand grows with that consistency, and you also figure out your authentic voice, which is going to help you gain confidence as you move further. Now, if your goals are something like, hey, I want to write a newsletter every week, or I want to be on more podcasts, there's ways to do that as well. But you have to have that network and you have to build that trust and you have to have that material and that base of expertise to get invited to those things. When you get invited to that and you don't, that's sometimes where you can get caught out. And that's where all of a sudden it's like, oh, they were there just to gain visibility, not to give value and share insight.
So if somebody listening to all of this is like, okay, Joel, all this sounds great, but like it's one more thing on my to-do list, and I already have, a to-do list that's a mile long. I need to focus on these other things that I'll say are core aspects of my job. What's the downside, or what's the, hey, if you don't commit time to building your personal brand, like here's, the negative that you potentially run into?
Yeah. So when you don't build your personal brand and you don't have, and you're not thinking about sort of what your goals are professionally, you can stagnate. You can get kind of stuck in one particular role. You aren't going to end up trying new things, and new things are where growth happens.
Joel, the other thing I wanted to ask you about real quick is how do you think AI and just the growth of AI is going to change the way we build our personal brands?
I think personal branding becomes even more important when it comes to AI being in this space. And the reason that I say that is your authenticity, your voice should become more apparent, not less. The tone that you use, the mistakes that we make will be amplified actually to create trust. AI democratizes the content creation side of things and can make people say, hey, here's this, here's that. But the best folks that are using it have trained it on their own content, right? And making sure that it's authentic and understanding that anything that they create creates a huge loss of trust. Um, I think that it makes it easier to see who is creating their own content and their own voice over those that have, like, where did they pop up with and why do they have a bunch of posts about this, and man, that seems a little off, or it's a little too polished, or haven't heard them speak on this topic before and now this seems like they really have some in-depth knowledge. And so I think that um, there's going to be a world where low volume, high quality human storytelling with people making mistakes and hair being out of place, right? Like just those types of things, but not six fingers on a hand, right? In an image or something to that effect. The lived experiences and imperfections become even bigger. I also think that AI polishes mistakes, people don't, right? So if you share a failure, you tend to say like, this was a learning experience, but here's what happened, right? And when you try and do that same type of content from an AI perspective, it it comes out, just doesn't work.
The last thing I do every episode, Joel, is fun rapid fire. So I'm just going to give you a handful of things and I want to get some quick thoughts or feedback from you on each, okay?
Yeah.
You're deep into the craft beer space, deeper than most people. So give us one or two beers that if like you can find are definitely worth getting for those who enjoy their beer.
My favorite brewery is New Glarus, which is out of Wisconsin. Unfortunately, their tagline is only in Wisconsin. And it means that you can really only get it in Wisconsin and buy it in Wisconsin. So, one of the things that I always say is if you are going to Wisconsin for a conference, if you are flying through, if you are doing any of those things, make sure to try out some New Glarus beer.
What's the best Foo Fighter song?
You know what? What is the latest one from their latest album? It's really good. Uh, here today, or here we are today.
Okay.
It's a really, really good one.
You live in the DC area. For those who travel that way, give them a restaurant recommendation. A nice place that is obviously not a chain.
Oh, I don't recommend chains. Love Korean barbecue. There's a place locally here in Fairfax, Mokja, that is excellent. A little hole in the wall. It's actually right next door to another place, Okonami, that Keith Lee, the food influencer from TikTok and Instagram, did a review on.
One more. I know you're a huge soccer fan, so the World Cup is obviously happening in North America next year. Give us an early prediction.
U.S. to the quarterfinals. That'll be as high as we've gotten for a little while, but we're not going to jump over that. And then I really think that for France, Brazil, and England are going to be there and doing well. And I think that it's going to be a little bit traditional.
Joel, I always appreciate our conversations, always thought provoking for me. And I have no doubt for the listeners today, they'll be able to have a ton of things that will get them thinking and a ton of things that will hopefully be actionable for them. And so I just appreciate you being willing to join me and to have this conversation today.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me, Jeremy. As always, love to have this conversation. And anytime I have an opportunity to share and help others as they think about their personal brand, it's great.
Thanks for listening to Mission Admissions. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's the largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.